Hi guys, and welcome to another episode of Kabir Considers. In this video, I'm going to react to D-Day, The Great Crusade by Extra History. Now, Extra History is a channel that's been recommended to me several times on this channel. I don't know why I've not checked them out since. Maybe it's because my list of reactions is just gargantuan at this point, but I love history. I'm a student of history, and I'm interested to see his or her take on this, how the video looks, you know, what kind of style I can expect from Extra History. So yeah, this should be fun. Let's do it.
When the signal is given, the whole circle of avenging nations will hurl themselves upon the foe and batter out the life of the cruelest tyranny which has ever sought to bar the progress of mankind.
Churchill, right?
That signal comes today. This episode is sponsored by Wargaming. New players can download World of Tanks and use the code NEPTUNE for free goodies. Link in the description. D-Day, June 6th, 1944. Months of effort have been building up to this day. Throughout England, 500,000 men have been gathered at staging areas to strike across the Channel as soon as the signal is given. Men from the United States, Britain, Canada, Australia, Belgium, Czechoslovakia, France, Greece, the Netherlands, New Zealand, Norway, and Poland. Today,
the Allies, right?
We'll be telling the American story, as best it can be told in a few short minutes, and over the coming weeks, thanks to the generous support of Wargaming, we will tell the story of 3 of the other major players involved. But that story begins with a dinner in Tehran in 1943. For the first time, the leaders of the most powerful Allied nations, the United States, the USSR, and the British Empire, met in one room. For years, Stalin, his nation battered by the Nazi invasion and bearing the brunt of the human cost of the war against Germany, had pressed the Allies to open up a second front to the war by invading France. The British had pushed back, arguing for operations in North Africa, and then an assault on Italy. But now, with the USSR winning on the Eastern Front, the demands from Stalin became harder to deny, and simultaneously, everyone started to think of the post-war settlement. If the Allies won without British and American troops liberating Western Europe, how could they stop the USSR from claiming huge swaths of land, and perhaps even, at least politically, dominating the continent? And so an agreement was made out in the deserts of Iran. The Western powers would open up a second front by invading France in May of 1944. Plans were drawn up. An amphibious operation of this size had never been tried. Men and material would have to be drawn back from around the world. New technologies would have to be invented. Engineering feats previously only discussed in conference rooms would have to be put to the test under wartime conditions.
It's crazy how war, obviously it's destructive, but it really is a catalyst for innovation in a lot of ways.
But the first decision that had to be made was where to land. There were 2 possible targets: Calais, the closest point in Europe to England, or Normandy, one of the farthest on the Channel coast. Calais was the sane, sensible place to land, but it had 2 notable disadvantages. First, terrain in which you could easily get bogged down, and second, the fact that it was the sane, sensible place to land. Reviewing the battle plan, Eisenhower and Montgomery were in agreement. They wanted the element of surprise, with the possibility of being able to rush off the beaches. So the decision was made. Normandy it would be. But this would require one of the greatest counterintelligence operations ever attempted to keep the secrets safe, not to mention the equipment and the manpower on an even greater scale. Entire harbors had to be fabricated which could be shipped over from England. More landing craft needed time to roll off the factory lines, so the operation was delayed until June. Finally, the day arrives, June 4th, 1944. Planes prep, final drills are run through, tens of thousands of men board ships for the invasion.
I mean, imagine being one of those men. Like, there's a good chance you're not coming home. There's a good chance you're never seeing your family again. Just the emotions. Man.
And then, the rain starts to roll in. Soon it becomes a storm. Ferocious waves sweep the channel. Clouds completely block the sky. High winds buffet any craft that ventures on sea, land, and especially air. Eisenhower is forced to make the decision. The attack must be delayed. Rain continues to pour the next day. A council of Allied commanders is called. If they delay again, they won't be able to launch until July. They need to do the channel crossing at night. They need to do commando raids and minesweeping when the unsuspecting Germans will have the fewest patrols out. But for a crossing of this magnitude, they need nearly full moon visibility.
Wow.
Even if they did decide to brave a launch without the full moon, tidal conditions wouldn't be right for another 2 weeks. What do? They've got thousands of men already holed up on boats, getting seasick and nervous and just plain stir-crazy. They've already started moving equipment and forces into staging areas which can clearly only be targeting one place, Normandy. And they've had to alert enough people up and down the chain as to the nature of the operation that with each passing day, the odds of keeping their landing location a secret plummet. But to cross in this weather, that would be madness. Then a captain is ushered in. He's an RAF meteorologist, and he is about to make what may well be the most consequential weather report of all time. He says he believes it's going to be clear on the 6th. Eisenhower nods. The operation is a go. 6,000 ships begin to steam across the channel.
Isn't it crazy how one thing can just swerve like the course of history? Like, I find stuff like that really interesting.
Minesweepers fan out ahead of them, clearing a path. For weeks, the Allied forces have bombed the German Air Force in the region nearly to oblivion. No enemy interceptors exist to spot the waves of gliders and transport planes carrying 17,000 airborne troops. The ships won't reach the beaches until dawn, but the airborne infantry has night work to do. First in are the Pathfinders, the men whose job it is to light the drop zones for all the other parachute infantry. Of the 4 planes carrying these Pathfinders, one overshoots their target, another has to bail before ever getting to France, and the remaining 2 kept most of their signaling gear in the ditched plane, leaving them desperately trying to signal the paratroopers by waving flashlights at the passing airplanes. The paratrooper drop goes even worse. Scattered by enemy anti-aircraft fire and blinded by low clouds, paratroopers jump from altitudes that are either too high, leaving them drifting slowly, unable to do anything but watch as enemy guns spit shrapnel up at them, or too low, breaking bones on landing as their parachutes don't have enough time to slow their fall. They're scattered all over, many of them landing miles from their drop zones, some landing in marshes or rivers, others being slaughtered as they drop right into the middle of the enemy.
This is in Band of Brothers. Band of Brothers, if anyone hasn't watched it and is interested in like war or just history, you need to watch it.
It was a harrowing and confusing night
Horrific.
of chaotic firefights and desperate small unit actions. But the more veteran of the American airborne troops, groups like the Screaming Eagles and the 505th, managed to pull together to capture crucial road junctions, communication points, and bridges, and even destroyed some of the artillery batteries that would imperil the landing at Normandy. And they would hold fast, delaying or preventing any counterattack that might sweep the impending invasion back into the sea. Then there's the initial bombardment. Allied bombing runs go astray, causing massive damage to the civilian centers in Normandy, but doing little to weaken the dug-in German positions. As dawn breaks, though, the Allied gunners can finally see their targets, and the bombardment becomes far more effective, softening up the beach for the initial assault. But there's little time remaining until the troops' scheduled landing. At 6:30 a.m. on June 6, 1944, the klaxons sound, and the assault craft are released. They plow through the chop, men huddled in their tin shells as German fire pours down, sinking entire landing craft to the bottom of the sea just off the Normandy coast. Then the assault craft hit the beach, ramps drop, and men charge out. But on Utah Beach, things have already gone horribly. The men look around them and the terrain's all wrong. They've landed on the wrong beach. Luckily for the Americans, the oldest man in the invasion, and the only general to actually join these ground troops, Teddy Roosevelt Jr., happens to have landed with them. The local commanders ask him what they should do, and living up to his namesake, he simply responds, "We'll start the war from right here." He correctly assessed that the beach that they'd landed on was actually a better, more easily takeable landing point than the one that the senior staff had assigned them. In a miracle of heroism and logistical coordination, he managed to reroute the entire Utah Beach invasion force to his location.
Wow, so he hid his chronic health issues. Yeah, that's a badass right there.
Direct the battle, and continuously rally the men as he walked the beach with his cane, waving his pistol. His new Utah beach would be the first beach successfully overrun,
died.
and for his actions there, he would be awarded the Medal of Honor. Omaha, though, was a different story. Here, the pre-landing bombardment had been even less effective. The seas were choppy, landing craft took on water, and men tried to bail with their helmets. Some of the landing craft sank, and those that landed were filled with retching, seasick men. Much of the armored support that was supposed to follow them foundered in the waves, or simply got picked off as they hit the shore. Soon, the men were all pinned down against a small shingle of land that provided what little cover there was to be found on the beach. Many of the units had taken heavy casualties, and much of the command staff was dead. With units getting washed ashore in the wrong places, or scattered in the desperate scramble to try to get to the small ridge of sand that served as cover, the assault had become hopelessly disorganized. The second wave met with much the same fate. Hopelessly bogged down, withdrawal from Omaha Beach was considered, but it was the vital linking point between the British and American forces. As the day wore on, a number of ranger units began to rally and scaled the bluffs, finally managing to assault German positions on the heights. At the same time, several of the naval ships came dangerously close to the beach to provide more effective support fire just as the German ammunition began to run out. Even after all of this, Omaha Beach wasn't truly cleared by the end of the 6th. But as the sun began to set on those bloodied beaches, it was clear that the American forces were there to stay. Join us next time as we join the British for their covert efforts to keep the biggest invasion in history a secret.
That was fantastic. Really, really well written, well explained. I love the animations. Really good. I can see why it's been recommended to me so much. I'm honestly lost for words at, back then, the limited technology that they had relative to what we have now. Yet, people were still going out there, willing to die, for their country. It puts me in a bit of a somber mood because it's what greater sacrifice, than that. War is often decided by people who will never actually step foot on the battlefield. Yeah, it's really, really, yeah. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next one.